Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wither. We have two fantastic artists in residence. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the artist in residency program, and then we'll move right into the talks. So the artist in residency program is in its 7th year, and this is a competitive program that Meredith alums can apply for. They can apply to come back and spend a semester building their personal body of work for application to grad school or to launch their career as an artist. And while they're here, they also learn some skills by shadowing a faculty mentor. Skills like being a teaching assistant, studio maintenance, and other ways to contribute to the department. And we have a variety of ways in which they do that. So if you're interested in learning more about the artist in residency program, there is a web link on Meredith College, this webpage. And I'm also always happy to talk to you, but I see some people in here that may want to apply at some future point. So I'm going to hand it over to Kayla.
So, hi, my name is Kayla Cooper. I want to first thank you all for being here today. It means the world to me. I am doing an artist in residency at Meredith with Professor Holly Fisher, and my body of work is focused in ceramic sculpture. So about me, I am a multimedia artist that graduated from Meredith College in May of 2024. So I'm a recent grad, and I focus in the realm of 3D art like ceramic, sculpture, stone carving, etc. This body of work is focused in the ceramic world. So I really enjoy creating statement pieces that challenge social ideals and topics. And I consider myself to be an advocate for change. Creating abstract art is my way of expressing my personal feelings about these things and these social things. So still allowing viewers to be able to create their own conclusions as well is important to me, which is why I kind of gravitate towards a lot of abstract art. My goals for this residency was to foster connection and also have some artistic growth, of course. So I wanted to connect with myself and with others through my artwork, being able to convey these really complex emotions and ideas through abstraction, and also allowing you guys, again, to create your own connection to my artwork. I also wanted to, again, build artistic growth. So I wanted to better myself as an artist by implementing like unfamiliar techniques. You'll see later on in this presentation, but I gained experience in underglazing, layering glazes, and working both larger and smaller. And then again, the hanging installation that you guys saw out there in the hallway. So my overarching concept, this body of work is meant to explore the detrimental effects of deteriorating social systems. So I wanted to use anatomical and organic forms to create pieces that represent corruption and the fragility of democracy and consequences of unchecked power. So these are some process photos. This is the series titled Necrosis. And yeah, this is me kind of just building. I was doing the coiling technique, which is just adding little snakes of clay on top of each other and smoothing it down. And then this is another one in that series. It's another one of the large ones. I did have a tiny little break here in this corner, but I was able to fix it, which was nice. And I carved the bottom out for this one and poked some holes to prevent any issues in the kiln, because we don't want air trap in the kiln. So again, another process photo. This is before and after glazing. I didn't have any pictures of the glazing process, but this is, yeah, the before and after. And these little red spots are actually a part of the glaze. So it was one glaze, and you can see the test tile is in this little corner right here. But this one is a jungle glaze, which pretty much has little chips of glaze color encased in the black glaze. So I didn't specifically put those colors there. That's kind of how it fleshed out of the kiln, which is really cool. And I like that it was a little bit unpredictable and fun. So my concept for this piece, I think it's important to give you a description of the title. So the Oxford Dictionary titles necrosis as the death of most or all cells in an organ or tissue. So this piece is about, or this series is about growing collapse of democracy due to self-preservation over community. So this corruption, and then they are kind of tying themselves into knots. So you're seeing these like knotted forms, tightly woven pieces. So there's also kind of like this tension and entanglement that represents the system kind of choking itself out. And then there is this corrosion and worn textures that are embodying decay. So this is the largest sculpture in the series. I am very happy with how it came out. I'm proud of the knot that was there. And I think it really shows this sense of tension. Here are some smaller ones in this series, and you'll be able to see them up close out in the hallway. But yeah, again, very happy with how these came out. And then this is them all together. Then perforated. So this one is another sculpture that, of course, you guys saw out there. But this one was fun. It was a lot of fun, but it did have some, not issues, but I had some challenges with the aesthetics of it. So originally you can see in this top corner, your left, I had the tubular form kind of wrapping around the sculpture rather than piercing through the center. And in a critique, I had gotten asked, hey, like, what if it's piercing through? And I kind of love that. So I ran with that. And so you'll see this is them piercing through. And then I also add that same corroded texture to tie these pieces together, but also to consider the same meaning. So I really like that this piece has that piercing. I think it adds a lot more dimension to the piece itself and also more violence, which is something that I noticed that I would get asked about more often in critiques was, hey, where's the violence? Like this is something that is very serious and very meaningful to you. So you can show like true emotion there. And I think I really just needed that push. And I was able to kind of express that here, which I really love. And then these are the test tiles at the top. That is my glaze palette, along with, of course, that Mako jungle glaze. So you can see, and I did some glazing, I guess, techniques. Like I tried something new, which was using a sponge with the glaze, and I kind of blotted it up there, and that's what created this bruising kind of color. So I blotted and layered in between the red colors and the creamy flesh colors, and it created this depth on the sculpture, which I really, really love how that came out. So my concept for this one was one, to express my personal feelings during this social climate, like the current social climate, kind of feelings of betrayal and hurt and fear. But this one is also meant to represent when the system that is meant to protect instead inflicts harm. So yeah, these visually are expressed by the crosshatch texture on the body is meant to represent scar tissue. And you can kind of see that. You'll see it better on the next slide. But there is like texture and cross-hatching at the bottom of this vessel. And then the sculpture has like the bruises, of course, that I talked about with the glazing technique. So this is the completed sculpture. And I really, really love how the movement turned out. I'm very happy with kind of this curve that's happening here. It feels like the sculpture is moving away from this violent piercing, moving away out of shock or fear or what have you. But I really love how it turned out. I think it's really beautiful. So next sculpture. This one are process photos of ischemia. This was my largest sculpture and the one that took the longest, but my favorite probably by far. Here are some more process. I did this one again by coil building and smoothing textures, things like that. This at the top you can see is me checking for any trapped air. Again, we don't want trapped air in the kiln or we can have some problems. So I was definitely avoiding that. And then this is kind of the maquette. And for those of you that don't know, a maquette is kind of like a 3D sketch. So it's me taking a smaller version of clay and building what I want it to look like in the larger scale. And then this is the larger scale. So I think it came out pretty close to the reference, but it's never going to be perfectly aligned with the maquette. But I was very, very happy with that as well. And then the glazing portion of this was pretty simple. The color scheme is here on the top, and then I also tried something else that was new, which was a splattering technique. And what I did was take a paintbrush with glaze on it, and I just flicked it kind of like you splatter paint. And glazes are pretty unpredictable, so I was a little bit nervous about this, but it turned out really beautifully. Down here in this red area, you can see that's where the blood splatter is. And that was what I was practicing and trying, which is new. So another dictionary word for you is ischemia. This one, the Oxford Dictionary says that it is a lack of blood flow to an organ or part of the body. So this piece to me is meant to represent the violence that feminine bodies endure at the hands of systems that value control over individual autonomy. So this lack of autonomy is visually represented by this tightening restraint on kind of the neck portion of this vessel. And so it is kind of gripping and tightening its reins on women's rights in that sense. And then you can see that this color, the purple and blue, is meant to represent a lack of blood flow and oxygen, kind of like if you were to tie a rubber band on your finger and your finger turns blue. So that is that. And then there is also this bubbling and bursting of guts that is representing the actual physical violence that is ensued and with the consequences of corruption. So a quote that I thought really spoke to this piece is by an American writer and activist, Rebecca Solnit, and she states that violence doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's as silent as withheld care. So again, I really, really love how this turned out. This is the completed sculpture. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say about that, but I love it. And then systemic chime. So this one is the hanging sculpture, sculpture that you saw in the hallway. So this one I really had to practice patience, working so small. And that was one of my goals, was to kind of extend my range of working smaller and larger. So yes, there was some patience involved, and I did have a few breaks. You can see in this middle picture, there was a few that broke in the kiln, but that is normal. And so I made a ton of these little small guys because I knew something would happen. So that was that. And then I also did some underglazing. You can see this gray part here is underglaze, and that is to prevent glaze from sticking to the bottom of the kiln, because you can see the underside of these pieces. I wanted them to be black, but regular glazes would stick itself to the kiln. So to prevent that, I used underglazes, which is kind of a matte version of glaze. And then here are some process photos again. To your left, that is the sculptures after they've been bisque fired with the underglaze. And then the right side, all the way to the right, is the glaze firing. And then at the top, that's the hardware that I created to kind of hang these pieces from. And it was a bit of trial and error on how to make sure they stayed, but I eventually figured it out with some Gorilla Glue. And then there is me on this cool ladder, looking so cool, hanging these pieces. So yeah, I thought this process was really cool. It was very gratifying. I was very proud of myself for getting up on that ladder and being cool about it. So, so for systemic chime, my concept behind this is that kind of like the little things that we let slide from the people in power will grow and grow and grow until there's no turning back. So I played around a lot with size in this piece because I think that the size of societal issues truly come down to perspective. And I think it's important to really care about the things that might seem small to you because they might be huge to your neighbor. So that was kind of like my biggest part of this. And then I also wanted to explore kind of feelings of personal instability, hence the precariousness of hanging this piece directly above my other piece. So yeah, so these vessels and these tiny little ceramics are meant to symbolize the vulnerability of human rights and the ease at which the systems that are meant to protect us can break down. And that is the completed sculpture. So happy with this one as well. You're gonna be like, okay, she's happy with all of them. I am though. But yeah, so that was my completed sculpture. And I want to thank you guys so much for listening to me. And if you have any questions for me, I will be by my artwork in the hallway at the end of this. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth. This is my presentation, obviously. I'm going to talk to you now. So, a little bit about me. I'm a Southern Pines-based printmaker, actually, an artist, but mainly printmaker. I graduated from Meredith in 2022. I work primarily with linoleum reduction prints. However, I do also love to do dry point. So that's mainly what is out in the hall. My work focuses on connection and the fragile nature of life. So that's like a repeated theme that kind of gets moved around a little bit, but is always kind of there in my work. The start of my residency, my goals, I had two main goals. Really wanted to create this one series I had in my head about making death seem comforting and more of a comforting experience instead of something to be feared. And then I also just generally wanted to really be able to expand my ideas when it came to experimenting with printmaking. I kind of get set in my ways every now and then, and I'll keep making art, but I won't like push to expand how I do things. So that was a huge part of this residency as well. The first one I would love to talk to you guys about is my Banshee prints, which they actually start off as prints, not one print. I started off trying to do a series that kind of seemed more like along the lines of iconography. So I tried to simplify things and have everything character-based. If you know what a banshee is or don't know, they're an Irish myth legend. They're always described as something that like screams when someone dies. So it's like a very scary, like you don't want to hear the cry of the banshee thing. Usually they're seen as being like women either very old or very young, but usually you can't tell which it is. It's just kind of like you can't see them too clearly. Either that or they are described to be a dog, crow, or ferret. So I tried to combine all of these in 3 different images. Here is them in progress. I was liking how they were looking. However, they were too simple for me. And usually I will just go in and like make a background that's like really complicated to kind of juxtapose the characters. However, I talked to Professor Johnson, who I was being mentored by, and we decided to try and collage them, which I had never even thought of doing. So that was very exciting. And this is how they turned out, which I, in general, would never put characters like this together. So this kind of a print is very unique for me, and is definitely a bit of an accomplishment in terms of expanding my horizons a little bit and how to go about printmaking. So I actually took all 3 linoleum prints and I carved out around each other so they would actually fit together like a puzzle piece. which was a little scary because if I messed up a little bit, there would have been like a big white gap. So just barely got it right. The second print series I would like to talk to you about is my big one. This is like the triptych. And I made these reflecting on death being like a character that's more so giving comfort and taking you away in a just more quiet and almost like relaxed way. So I wanted big kind of gothic but natural looking background. I wanted to kind of combine those two to kind of give it somewhat of not religious undertone, but to kind of reference it because religions tend to focus a lot on death. But this is also still very much character based. I wanted it to be very still so that it seemed like it was more quiet, but then have the beauty of printmaking and how bold it is really speaks through that. So those were kind of my goals. We decided to go with color. I don't usually work in color much, so this was a big step outside of my comfort zone. The way you do color with linoleum, especially the way I was doing it, is you only get so many color prints before you move on to the next stage of printing. So I didn't carve out the window at first. I carved out the people and then printed here on the right these colored prints. And then once I thought I had enough, I then carved out the window and printed the black that's like on the left on top of the color. So I only got so many colored prints and I can never go back. So this is it with the second layer. That black layer is sitting on top of the color layer. I think that these turned out so good. And I really like too how even if I lined it up really well, color still showed through the characters a little bit and gave it almost a little bit of a like vibrancy or vibrating almost sensation. So I did the same with all of them, just printing color first. This is the color print. And then once I was done, I had just a bunch of these color and black and white ones. I could go back and print just black and white versions of these prints. However, they'll never have the same effect as the colored ones. So this is the last one. I decided to go with a halo effect, change it up a bit. This one I wanted to be kind of more like the finale in a way, just because this one was dealing with a much younger character. And then here is it with the black layer. And this really changed the print, I think, on this one a lot. Just having that warmth now blocked out by a lot by the black. And here are all three of them together. You'll notice it's a woman, a man, and then a baby. I wanted the first one to be more so like giving condolences. It's actually what it's called. Just kind of, you know, that confrontation of like, okay, it's time to move on. It's time to go to the next thing. And then I have conversations in the middle, which is more so talking about it, taking it from a more personal perspective, a little bit less necessarily comforting and more like logic-based, I guess, than emotion. And then the third is comfort. And this one was kind of a bigger one too, because it really confronts the cyclical nature of life. You know, once life starts, it already has an end in sight. And so I wanted this one to really show a lot of comfort and a lot of warmth because death is taking care of the child, not taking the child necessarily away from comfort. I did do one big dry point etching, which I'd love to talk about. This is a plexiglass sheet, and I took a needle and scratched into the plexiglass over and over again to make very small lines. Once I was done with this, I then took ink and put it all on top of the plate and then kind of cleaned off and rubbed off a lot of the ink. So the only ink left was in those little grooves that I had scratched into it. So this is how it looked afterwards. This one is called Resist. I wanted it to be more so one that you look at and you have one opinion, and then the more you look at it, you kind of change your opinion. This is more so about nature and systems that you might not question. When you first look at it, you see like a rabid dog or wolf, coyote, and these hands kind of restraining it, and it's kind of scary, and you're like, oh my gosh, the hands are going to get bit. But the more you kind of like look at it, the more you realize that that's just the nature of the dog. And this is what it does. And those hands are actually restricting it and restraining it from doing what it naturally needs to do, and therefore making it more aggressive and dangerous. So that's resist. And that's all I have for you. Any questions? I would love to answer them. I'll be over by my art. So thank you all for coming out. This means a lot. And thank you.